Seti, hey, good morning.
Hello.
Hey,
Good
you
morning.
you seem more awake than I am, even though it's much earlier than your day than here's mine. I'll tell the audience it was funny. We got on just before I pressed record, and he asked me if I had a cold. I said, "Well, I haven't really started talking yet today, so maybe I actually, there's a little more bass in the voice."
It sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you. So, Seti, I know when we decided to talk today, I'd sent you like a 3 minute something that I made a little earlier this week about decisions and about decisions coming from the heart. And I know there's a couple other things that I, along with George, had released this week. And I'm going to start like this. So you kind of already heard this. So my surprise is not a surprise, but um, I feel right now, and maybe others are feeling this, and I'd love to hear, Seti, if you've had these experiences or if you're in one now. I'm going to call it a shedding of skin or a reinventing of yourself, kind of a rebirth, if you will. I think I've been fighting this a little bit, sort of incrementally, and now for me, there's several things kind of happening at once, which seems to always be the case, but this is yet another emergence. And so I would put it this way: um, there's a lot of things that I've noticed for me that I want to. How do I say it? There's a lot of me that I think is really positive and loving and caring, and then there's other pieces that I think are positive, but they're actually framed negatively or limiting. I'd even gotten some feedback from someone who I've come to now know kind of through this process, and he said he said, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. You know how that happens when, someone, he probably said it a little differently,
Right.
but he, he, he came upon the fact to say, you need to forgive yourself and basically don't apologize for who you are because you're limiting yourself. And for me, and this comes along with the decisions that I talked about, um, I I continually want to make sure I don't sound like some cocky prick. So I try and bake that in humility. But I think what he was saying in a loving way, and I didn't take it personal, is I think he's correct. Um, that because of that, I'm limiting myself, and that even though I tell everyone, and I even tell you, don't, it's not your business what other people think of you. I still haven't let go of that thing. I think there's so many things enmeshed within me that wants to be either likable or not, disrespect someone, that I'm doing it so much to that degree. So this is going to be a really interesting emergence, I think, for me. And I'd love to hear if you've gone through this or others, who are going to watch this have gone through this, where it feels so intertwined between, inside of me, that how am I going to, throw the bathwater out and not the baby, right? How can I be more authentically myself and shed some of those things, because it's not like there's just one thing and I can focus on it. That's why I think it's so much harder for me. Even I'll say it, even in the almost 4 minutes that we've been talking, I've started to realize, and my wife has even been really good at this too, even though I don't have any questions, to ask you other than this for today, and I feel I am being authentic, it still feels a little I still feel a little stiff. Like it's almost like I have to go, oh, all right, just relax and just kind of talk. Um, I've even seen that over some of the episodes. It's almost as if I'm reading when I'm even not. Um, I threw a lot at you, but what do you think of any of that? What's your perspective on it?
It's funny as you're talking, I was reminded. Oh, I actually wasn't reminded. I was trying to do this throughout the week. My schedule is I try to record a new episode every Sunday evening.
Yeah,
And I had my outline, as we've discussed before, of things that are on my mind or touching my heart. And I spent Sunday evening take after take after take because I couldn't, I could visualize the words that I wanted to say, but they weren't coming out right.
Right.
So I finally just walked away. And then Wednesday I tried again, still no luck. And yesterday I finally said, throw the script out or the outline out,
Yeah.
just let it go and
Right.
say the things that are coming naturally to you. And I think what you're saying towards the tail end of your statement there resonated with me because that's how I felt this entire week
Yeah.
was, and I made a point when I started my channel to always be guided by what I feel and what the spirit is telling me.
Right.
And I went away from that this last week or this week, and I could feel it. So that in itself became a decision for me too, where I just said, you're trying to do too much
Yeah.
and you need to revert back to what you originally said you were going to do. And that was to be led by the Spirit. Lo and behold, everything went great.
Yeah.
I don't know if the episode is going to be great and the things that I
It'll be
shared.
great. It'll be
Yeah,
great.
but I was able to get out the things that I truly felt, not some manufactured thing about this, that, and the other. It was
Yeah.
more, this is what I feel. And it turned out great. But as far as decisions are concerned, I feel you on that. And I agree 100% with a lot of things that you just shared. One of the leaders in my church, who's passed now, one of his favorite sayings was, "Decisions determine destiny."
Yeah.
And your destiny could be one thing from day to day and another thing years later when you look back on it. But I think you always have in mind where you're headed, and the decisions that you make could veer you off course uh, to another goal that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
But the end goal is to eventually steer back towards the destiny that you're seeking. And I can tell you many, many times where the decisions I made took me off course from where I want to be. But years later, there were things on that side road that I needed to experience in order to be better at getting to where I need to be.
Yeah. Is it, it's interesting when you're describing thinking about decisions, and it sounds like you don't necessarily expect. Would it be true to say that you don't know what to expect, so you're staying open hearted as to what's going to happen? Would that be true?
Yes. Yes. Very
But would
much.
it also be true that you? I'll say it this way. I I am focused now on trying not to say it's going to be hard. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. Because truly, I have no idea whether it's going to be easy or hard. And looking
Right.
back where I sit with you today, brother, a month from now or a year from now, will I really think it's hard? And will the answer even matter? So,
Yeah.
you know, um, it's harder to find the words right now to it because I'm kind of right in it and immersed. So it's a lot of bountiful energy that I have. And so I'm trying to find the words to sort of measure and explain it. But I do think very much that even though I feel that it's positive, and when thinking about decisions and moving forward, I shouldn't not only not have any assumptions, but no expectations if it'll be difficult or easy or anything else.
Yeah.
I should just stay within saying, this is what I will do, and the decisions are going to come up. And when you describe that as far as doing that, was it the third take, I guess, that you did it?
Yeah. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
a lot of takes later.
I feel like that comes from your heart when you drop into your heart, and it's
Yeah.
less about your mind.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
your heart can think as well. Frankly, more so. I'm at a point where I believe that your spirit and your soul and your higher self is connected right here.
Yeah.
Your mind is a wonderful thing. Your brain is a wonderful thing. I don't take away from that, but your heart is where that intuition and everything else lives. So whatever take that was, Seti, I think that's when you dropped into that,
Yeah.
from my perspective.
I agree.
Um, You mentioned that you watched the episode that George and I did on Thursday. I think it was 9, so this is 10. Um, what did you think about that? Do you see any linkages for you from what we're talking about here to that? And I'll preface it once you kind of give your feedback so people can hear it, for those who didn't watch it. But did you make any linkages for yourself in that?
I did. I mean, a lot of the things you guys are like super smart with the terms and things like that. But
That's all George. That's not me. That's all George.
but I remember at one point, I can't recall where how many minutes into it, my mind started to drift off because I got caught up with some of the things that you guys were saying and referring it back. And this happens so often, referring it back to my own life. And this past week, I was watching this Netflix documentary, and
Okay.
I can't remember the exact title, but one of the individuals was explaining um, a step by step or a play by play of what happened in that experience. And initially, they're like, the tornado's coming, and we got to get away from this. Well, they got to a point where they could they could dive into a convenience store, I think it was, and it was rough. I mean, they could feel the wind, and they're getting pelted by things. And then all of a sudden, and it felt like an eternity, but then all of a sudden they looked up and there was the blue sky, and it was like
Right.
miracle. But they didn't know that they were in the eye of the storm,
Oh, yeah.
and that the hardest part of that storm was still on its way,
Right.
the other side. So I think sometimes when you talk about things um, that have to do with those decisions and getting too much in your head, because I've experienced that. I know other people who have experienced that. You tend to think when you're in that peaceful moment
Right.
that that was the answer to a prayer or the answer to whatever you were seeking at that time.
Right.
But the harder times are still ahead of you.
Right.
And until you can weather that second storm, the lessons you learned while you were waiting for the storm to really hit, those are the times where you're actually going to learn. Though it's the thinking part where um, initially that storm hits you, and then you're in the middle and it's peaceful, and then you're just kind of there. You're in your comfort
Right.
zone, but it's your heart that's going to. I believe it's your heart that's going to get you past the bigger part of the storm that's still ready to hit.
I believe that too. I do.
I don't know if that answered your question or even relates to what you and George were
No,
sharing, but that's how I felt.
no, it definitely does. It even relates to something that you and I believe it was you and I that talked about it. You talked about sort of an if then statement. Do you remember the episode we did about
Yes,
if then
yes.
statements? So
Mhm.
my mind went there because I was thinking, okay, you've weathered the storm, you think, and now you're in the eye of it. You don't realize that there's another wave coming,
Yeah,
but that if you can move to not expecting what's next, just being resolute in yourself and believing in yourself, again, from your heart, I believe the same thing that you do, that it is in your heart. That those if then statements, so that if this happens, then I'll do this, to just know and believe and have faith in yourself and have faith in
yes.
God and higher power, that you will get through it. Moving
Yeah,
from I want to get through it to I will get through it. I will
yeah.
get through this regardless. That's what that means to me. So no, I mean you nailed it. I'll I'll tell you, brother, and I do this too. But like I heard this week of someone when I was doing an interview, for a position, um, not apologizing for me being me. Um, I'll share that with you too. That when you respond to me and give me an answer, it's from you. It's from your heart, and I see connections in it, even if you might not. So you're answering it the way you should. Just I believe in you, brother, and I love your answers. So your answers are great. You
Thank you.
you nail them. Those eyes of a storm, I think, can you can feel in control and you can feel like you're managing things. And then some of us or all of us maybe have a tendency to just, okay, I got through it and I've made it on the other side.
Yeah.
Which maybe some of us need. We need just that reprieve to say, okay, it's over. There's not a second wave coming or anything like that. And I think of people that you and I might talk to day, and those that might watch this to say, well, now I need to think about the next thing that's coming, and now I need to think about that, and
Yeah.
it's too much. It gets me. Just know within you, belief in yourself, forgiveness for yourself, and faith is going to get you through anything. That faith,
Exactly.
that faith in yourself is that higher power that I believe lives within
Exactly.
you.
I agree. And that's why I think, and people may disagree, but this is how I feel. When that second wave comes through, as I mentioned, it's the heart that's going to carry you through that at that moment. Because now, um, going back to that example, listening to this person's experience,
Yeah,
he was completely exhausted because he's just holding on to his loved one. He's holding on to, I think it was a concrete slab, and they're just in the moment. And
yeah,
he wanted everything in his body and his head said, let go. But it was his heart and his love for the people that he was trying to hold on to
right.
that was able to get him through the storm. And that's exactly the example that you're bringing up here is at some point your head is no longer a factor.
Right.
It's you see it in sports, you see it in business, every aspect where people can succeed is it's the passion that will drive you across the finish line, not what you're thinking about, because that part is already over.
your your heart your heart knows you will get through it. Your heart
Yeah,
is prepared much more than maybe we give it credit for. So
exactly.
even if the physical or the mind is like, they're in, I'm going to say it, they're in 3D world like we all are. We can see,
Yeah.
we can touch, we can smell. And you're talking about the heart. You mentioned sports. So now here's another, again, I'm going to praise you. I'm going to praise you a lot on this. So your answer leads me to the next thing that I wondered how I was going to bring into this conversation. And there you go. Maybe I should just not do questions anymore. I kind of think maybe that's going to make me feel a little more, a little less rigid.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned sports. I'm going to give the name, and it won't matter about it. I'll jump into what kind of his topics are. But have you ever heard of the name Lanny Bassham or Bassam?
It sounds familiar.
Okay.
What sport?
He was an Olympic shooter, like,
Okay.
and he's written a couple books. I can't remember the titles of them. Anyone can look up Lanny Bassham, and you can find it,
Hmm.
Spotify or YouTube or wherever. So he talks, and I'm gonna give my interpretation of this because I've just come across it, so I won't do this perfect. Um, I think the statistic is something like 5% of the athletes win 95% of the games, just 5%. And there's, I think he looks at it as a triad of like, there's your conscious mind, there's your subconscious mind, and then below that is your self image. And all
Uh-huh.
three are there. And the guy who shared this with me, which is the same one that gave me that feedback about don't apologize for being who you are. Um, he said, "Now, what do you think? Which part do you think actually matters the most?" And I guess the subconscious.
Mm.
And I thought, well, subconscious because you're locked in and it's repetition. If it's golf, you hit the same shot over and over,
Yeah.
or if it's shooting, you're leveling into whatever that process is you're preparing. And he said, no, it's not that. It's your self
Oh,
image, and
okay.
that hadn't occurred to me until I listened to it a little bit more. So your self image and what Lanny talks about is this: not that you want to hit a good shot, not that you want to score a goal or not that you want to do this. I'd love to try to make a rugby reference, but I can't because I don't know the term, so you'll have to help me. Your self-image is believing in yourself, regardless of the output, the rightness or the wrongness or the goodness or the badness of what actually happens in this 3D world. It is preparing that you see yourself make that shot. You see yourself do this. You see yourself do that. I will do this. And whatever the outcome is the outcome. I'll say like hitting a baseball for me, which I, played a lot in my youth, well over a decade. Once that ball leaves the bat, it's going to do whatever it's going to do. So the output isn't, I'm equating this now to life. The output is whatever the output's going to be. But if you visualize, I will nail this presentation, I will hit this shot, I will do this, and then let the output of it become whatever it is. And so I'll put it this way. What's your favorite rugby player? Do you have a favorite rugby player or a favorite team?
Right now, my current current player is a guy named Artie Savea.
Okay.
Just amazing, amazing player.
So have you ever watched any interviews of artists, or maybe he just came off the field and he gets interviewed? Have you ever seen one? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So if you've seen this, or if you can just kind of put yourself there, if you asked him, hey, artist, how was your game? What do you think his response would be?
It's pretty consistent how he responds. And those are usually the questions that he is fielding. He always praises God, and then he praises his team, and then the very end he'll talk about his own performance. And very consistent.
Okay. And what, if you can recall, what part of his performance does he talk about? I'm leading the witness here, but what part of his performance does he talk about, do you think?
He usually talks about the things he could have done better. Yeah. Some missed opportunities is usually what he refers to.
Right.
And then he always wraps it up with, but we're going to try to do better next time.
Right.
Yeah.
I ask that because that's the same thing that Lanny said too. Not the first two, which I'm glad that he praises God, because all gifts are from him.
Yeah.
And then his teammates, that's wonderful. The last part is what I'm going to focus in on.
Okay.
So if I asked you how your day went, or I asked you how that call went, you might talk about some of the positive, but it's so easy for any of us to say, and I'll go back to rugby, this play, I really should have had my head in the game more, and I should have done this and I should have done that. We focus directly on the negative, which you and I have talked about. I'm going to lose count as to how many times we talk in episodes, so I'm going to stop trying to make the episodes. But that's the first thing we go to, instead of, here's what I did well. Here's where I really excelled. And a lot of that, I think, is because we want to remain humble. We want to thank God. We want to thank our teammates, and we want to push for what we should have done so we get better for the next time. We don't always think about, what did I do well? And I think that's kind of where, humility sounds great. It's wonderful to be humble. But if we're framing it in a way of the things I didn't do this and I didn't do that, you're kind of throwing that out into the universe to be like, I guess that's what he wants. I guess he wants to not do well. I guess he wants to, does that make sense to you?
It does, yes.
Yeah, it took me a little while to get there, but that's kind of where the sports sort of theme went into, because when I first heard this, I'm like, I don't know if I want to listen to a sports guy talk about this, but then that part resonated with me, to talk about what did go well, and focus on that for yourself, because that game it's Artis, right?
Artie, yeah.
Artie, that game that Artie just came from, well, that game is over. And yeah, of course, there's a sports reporter asking him the questions, and I'm sure he's got an obligation. He's got to focus on that. But for him, or for you, or for me, we've got to move forward.
Yeah. So. Did I lose you?
You froze for a moment, but it should be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could hear you, but then I saw something pop up saying that you're trying to reconnect. Sorry, my
Yeah.
internet's been shoddy.
Oh no, it's good. The good thing about this software that we use is that if you dropped or I did, it just starts another track and it'll just keep going.
Awesome.
That's like that interview that I had of the woman who lives out in the middle of the Atlantic, and hers dropped for a minute, and she's like, "Can you hear me?" I'm like, "You're good. Just keep rolling." And the track was afterwards. So the
Wonderful.
recording will be what it'll be.
Good.
Yeah, thank you for kind of walking through that with me about it. So I just see so many, as far as I can, say right now, I just see so many applications to that, personally, for me, for you, for anyone.
Yeah.
How, call it manifesting or whatever you want to, of saying I will do this, and let go of what that output is, and still know I believe. I'm believing more and more every day. And I'm going to say it this way: I will believe it. I do believe it. Your humility isn't lost when you think about you succeeding in every single way and triumphing in every single way. You, you can still be humble and be that.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. And I do see that a lot in sports where you tend to focus on the negative. I've seen guys who won gold medals
Yeah.
and their first thought is, man, I missed that. And, or I need to do better at this instead of, yeah, I recognize that there's some things I could do better, but here's what I did. And what's funny is, when I was coaching youth sports, you always have to go through these, annual trainings, just like we do with work. And one of the things that they focused on was you start with three negative things, but you always have to finish with three positive things.
Right.
And it was, like you said, it was always easier to say, man, you guys didn't do this, this, and this. But then afterwards, you're kind of like, what did you do good? You're
Right.
struggling to find something positive. But
Yeah.
so I got into the habit of, as we were in the middle of a game, just writing down for the team things that I saw that were good in them,
Right.
and that list continued to grow. And I tend, even though there were a lot of things that I wanted to correct, I spent more time on those positive things because you're right, it lifted their spirits, even though in a heavy loss, it
Yeah.
lifted their spirits, and they were like, okay, the coach recognizes that we tried our absolute best to do
Right.
what we had planned to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's how for you did you come to wanting to frame it in that positive? How did that come up for you? How did you arrive there? What prompted you to think about asking about the good? Was it a specific thing, or did that just come from within you?
I recognized, especially in some of you're always going to have your studs, and they're going to perform regardless. Even on their worst days, they're better than the second tier guys. But I concentrated more on them because I believe that um, you're not really a coach unless you can make sure that everybody in that team is performing optimally.
Yeah.
Um, so I saw the change in them when I was being more positive. They had a greater desire to do things better for themselves and for the team when you were being positive. Whereas
Yeah.
when we concentrated on the negative things, then the heads were down.
Right.
People started showing up late to practices because they knew coming to practice was just going to be um,
Right.
a whole list of bad things that you could point out instead of
Yeah.
praising the things that they. And what was funny was, even when we were saying things that, as coaches, we were saying things, pointing out things that were negative. We, when we did it in a positive light,
Yeah.
then they were more positive as well. So their performance started to increase, and their activity on the field became more increased because they were more involved in doing good things. It just changed the mood and the spirit of the team.
It did. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure it did.
Yeah.
This brings to mind something I want to ask you. And we can stay on sports here for now.
Sure.
And I know you got to drop soon, so we'll wrap this up in a bit. But there's a couple individuals usually on a team, in my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. There's a couple individuals usually on a team that are so hard on themselves that no coach is going to reach the depths of which they reach internally, that they're beating themselves up. So they might feel like they thrive on the negative, because they're already beating themselves up. So anything the coach would say, they're like, I'm already 30 miles down the road on what you're saying. Like, bring it on,
Yeah.
because it's not touching me. And some of those individuals might be really, excelling. But now I think right here, right now, that might even be limiting for them. That if they were not so hard on themselves, even though they feel like, well, that's how I got better. Like, I just grinded and I yelled at myself and I looked in the mirror and I was like, who are, that kind of thing. But even though that has brought them a tremendous amount of high functioning success, does that still actually limit them too? What do you think about that? Do you think that's possible?
I've seen it. I've seen it on athletic fields and courts where, and by the way, those are the ones that I loved coaching the most
Yeah.
because they changed me because of who they are, and it made me want to be a better person because they I saw, like you said, the limiting behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
but knew their potential,
Yeah.
and you had to somehow break down that those barriers
Right.
so that you could have some honest conversations about, you're telling yourself that you're not good,
Yeah.
but I see so many good things in you.
Right.
And it also switched my mentality as a coach, because when you first start out, it's all about, let's win this, let's win this, let's win this.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it switched it from the stat sheet to life lessons. So I became more of a mentor than I was a coach. And the mentor part was, I want you to succeed as an individual in life more than I want you to succeed in this one game, in this one moment. And that made a huge difference in the way that I interacted with people as well. Whether it
Yeah.
was an assistant, because I had some assistant coaches who had carried those burdens from their youth all the way up to adulthood.
Right.
And there was one coach in particular where we were having this a similar conversation, where I finally said, I think you have a lot to offer these boys, but I don't think you do. In your mind, in your mind, you think that you don't have
Right.
anything to offer to these boys other than their rugby skills and fitness, etc.
Yeah.
And he kind of looked at me and said, "You know what? I think you're right, because I see a lot of myself in a lot of these young men."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I think that's really why you're here on this team as a coach, not to teach them skills on the field, but to teach them skills in life."
So it sounded like that assistant coach that landed well with that feedback from you. How did it go from there? Did you see a lot of differences from that time forward
He
for that
became a
person?
head coach.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, yeah, he became a head coach, and he was thriving in that environment because he set aside um, his um, his desire to be a better rugby coach, and elevated the part of him that showed to people that he was a better person.
Right. Be
Yeah,
who you are.
exactly.
Warts and all.
Not what everybody else wants you to be.
Right. Right. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I, Seti, I appreciate you making time to talk through this. I'll have to think about what to title it because there's so many great things in it. I'm not sure if I'll be able to land on one.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you kind of want to share on this topic, and or just in
No,
general?
maybe just one last thing as you're going back to that. Well, just going back to that example of that Olympic athlete
Yeah,
and the subconscious versus what was the other title?
it's the conscious and the subconscious, It's funny how I'm looking at my hand, looking up at the camera. It's funny. Conscious, subconscious, and then self-image. Those are the three.
Self-image. And it was the self-image that mattered most in his mind, right?
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
because I would have answered subconscious as well. Because there's those moments, if I think back, where whether it's a golf shot or rugby, whatever sport you can apply it to, I for some reason, when you're saying shooting, I was already thinking about archery. And
Yeah.
when there's a saying in Samoa where, see if I interpret this correctly.
Okay.
Um, Let me say it in Samoan first. Maybe this will help jog my memory.
Yeah.
O le tia e le seua
Okay.
lo finagalo. O le tia e le seua lo finagalo. So your desire cannot be diverted once you let go of the arrow. So
Right.
your desire cannot be diverted once you let go of the arrow. And what that refers to is in ancient Samoa, the kings or royalty would go out on these hunting trips, and they would shoot exotic birds
Okay.
so that they could make beautiful arrangements for their clothing, etc.
Yeah.
I'm butchering this, but we'll continue. But the saying refers to once you let go of that arrow, it's like you said, the output doesn't matter anymore because you have no control over it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that kind of came to my mind as you were explaining that, because it's the same exact thing. You've done everything to prepare for that moment. And there's some muscle memory involved. There's a little bit of thinking involved, but you don't want to overthink it because you're relying on your skill.
Right.
But once you let go of it, the result is no longer in your hands.
Right.
And
It's not.
that's I've seen and experienced it myself when we're trying to control every single result, but the result is not up to you at that point because you've done everything in your power to control the situation until it's no longer yours.
That's right.
And that there's a lot of wisdom in that, and there's a lot of life experiences that we can look back to where those situations were exactly right. And there were a lot of critical decisions in my own personal life, but I just wanted to share that with you because it came back to my memory, that saying that and that's I believe we've talked about this many times. This conversation is organic because there was something that needed to be said to the audience, and I think that's what it was. Move
I
forward in faith and let the outcome decide itself.
I agree completely. Um, after we conclude this, I would love if you could send me that saying, and I'll translate it
Yeah,
because that's going to be the title. I mean,
yeah.
that's it right there. Yeah. All right. Thank you, brother, for all of this. Thank
You're
you for
very
joining.
welcome. Thank you
Well,
for inviting me.
of course. Yeah. I mean, next time won't be very far away. It's close. I know. Anything else you wanted to say before we sign off?
That's it. Have a great day. And thank you for your listeners who have actually visited my channel and commented as well. It's been very nice to form some new relationships and friendships from your audience. So thank you for listening.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you, Seti. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you,
Take care,
everyone.
my brother.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye bye.